What's up? So finally got a proper top-down rig. So with that being said, I can probably expedite videos a little bit faster now, but definitely still let me know. Do you guys prefer me doing content like this, or do you guys prefer to look me in the video? I meant having me in the video. With that being said though, as usual, like, subscribe, comment, especially comment, guys. Let's just talk down below. So definitely just, give it a subscribe. Definitely helps the channel out. A lot of you guys are not subscribed, yada yada. Let's talk about this. So this is the KBEAR Tourbillion Pro, and the first time when I see this, I immediately had a nostalgic hit because I brought these out, which is the TA Audio L3s. Now this, in my opinion, is probably the most beautiful piece of IEM faceplates that I've seen back when I just started off with my audiophile journey. The moment when I had my eyes on this, I'm like, God damn, this looks extremely amazing. And fast forward a few years, you definitely feel like maybe they could execute it a little bit well, comparing that to two-dimensional cogwheels. And personally, the Tourbillon Pro is the better execution of that, because beneath this glass faceplate, this transparent glass faceplate, you can see that the cogs are actually 3D instead of being a sticker. So definitely design wise, the KBEAR Tourbillion Pros are already extremely nice. But with that being said, this thing is more simple in terms of the config. This thing has a DD and also a BA. Wait, sorry, two BAs, 1+2, and this thing has a switch. This thing has none. So again, the KBEAR Tourbillion Pro is a single DD 10mm config, and with its config, it's using a PU plus PEK plus DLC blue diamond coating composite diaphragm. That is a mouthful, but basically saying that this driver is a little bit more complex in terms of its magnetic composition and in terms of the way that it's being chambered so that the diaphragm can perform better. But with that being said though, let me just play through this unboxing so that you guys can see it as well. Now, the unboxing experience of this is honestly a very big step up than the usual KBEARs that you usually associate with, because considering that the fact that this thing is $100 retail, but currently right now y'all can get it for 30% off if y'all use my unaffiliated code. The code here, even though it's in my name, it's only letting you guys know that y'all are my viewers, and that's it. I don't get a single cent out of this, so definitely props to KEEPHIFI. They sent this over my way and they gave my viewers a code, so support the people who support me. Critical 2024, I guess. Now, back to this. But anyways, in terms of the unboxing experience, honestly, just looking at the B-roll, y'all can probably see that it's honestly quite complete. But definitely, for some reason, usually when you open up the box and you see things are being presented like this, you'll assume the cable is inside the case. But when I opened up the case and I'm like, yo, where is the cable? I suddenly got a little bit panicky. But after removing the foam part, I do realize, oh, it's underneath here. But definitely, they could probably do it directly in the case so that they don't need to do that much, extra stuff on the foam packaging, because, this case, honestly, is quite good. For $100, they are giving you a solid zipper pleather case, which for most IEM brands out there, there's some that only give you pouches. So, props to KBEAR for doing this. They also give you a microfiber cloth so that y'all can clean up your very glossy zinc alloy shell KBEAR Tourbillion Pros. But anyways, they also give you two sets of tips. When you take them out directly, they are being given a standard, these types of tips, which is a more narrow bore type of thing. And they also give you their own KBEAR stock tips, which is a wide bore. Personally, this thing feels a little bit better on my ear, and I think this would probably be better for most people as well, because it's softer and also it doesn't have that harder of a stem as well. And personally, this thing also kind of pushes out the mid-range a little bit more comparing to your standard board, which probably recessed everything back a little bit. So there's that. Last but not least, fits, which again, I don't think I have any issue. This thing doesn't have any driver flex. This thing really fits well in my ear. It's your very standard-ish type of ergonomic IEM shell, so I don't have an issue with this. Anyways, let's directly go into the sound part, which is probably what most of y'all want to listen to. The KBEAR Tourbillion Pros are of a V-shaped tuned IEM, And definitely it has a fun sounding type of bass. That's the first thing that I've noticed when I listen to this. Quite warm, to be honest, extremely warm, but after burning this in for a few days, I think it's around 20 to 30 hours ish, the warmness kind of settles down a little bit. Still warm, but it's more, I would say, broken in, so that you won't feel like it's too much. You won't feel like it's too saturated. I suddenly had this recollection where, the bass honestly reminds me quite a lot about the BLO trees. The BLO trees are also quite a very popular IEM back then, which, again, is one of the few IEMs that I started out with, and it is extremely amazing. But in the end, I kind of matured with my taste, and I decided to go with the BLO ones. Occasionally going back to the BLO trees if I want a little bit more, craziness on the low end. But with that being said, though, this thing overall has very plentiful, very fun and deep bass. Lower bass is quite dominant overall, and it has a good amount of texture. Mid bass is kind of probably the part where I think this thing resembles the BLO tree the most, where it's quite beefy, it's quite, aggressive. And for some people, it might be a little bit bloaty. I feel like at this point, I associate this thing with bloatiness, but to each their own. I feel like if you are a bass head, this thing is probably right up your alley. So definitely get this to have a try. And bass definition, in my opinion, I feel like I wouldn't say it's subpar, maybe because I'm too used to extremely detailed bass. But if, let's say, I'm starting out with this and I'm comparing this with the BLO tree, I think it's probably more or less the same. Maybe this thing is a little bit more smoothened out than the BLO tree, but still, I think for people who are starting out, they probably don't want too much definition in the bass area, rather than, just having something that sounds a little bit more fun. So this thing basically has a fun bass. But definitely one thing to take note, if you are listening to things with extreme amounts of bass, bleeding might occur. So keep that in mind. Okay, going on to vocals, which personally is my favorite part every time. Now, this thing overall has a laid-back presentation, but it still maintains the energy as the IEM is performing. Even though this thing has your typical, V-shaped IEM type of vibe, I feel like it's not as recessed as other things. And regarding this, the vocal timbre on this is extremely, I would say, dependent on whether your vocalist is male or female. Because male vocals are definitely on the lower end of the FR. They will be a little bit more colder, and they will be a little more neutral compared to female vocals, which overall feels more smoothened out, more laid back, more note weight. So simply saying, this pair is probably more suited for female vocals. So again, like I said, with male vocals, for people with deeper voices, kind of like Rich Brian, I think that's probably the best way for me to explain. He sometimes might have a little bit more of a nasally voice. So for people who have that level of, octave in their vocals, definitely it might sound a little bit nasally. But for female vocals, which specifically, I always like to complain that J-pop has that very, very weird ACG thinness to it, which I don't like. This thing doesn't have that issue. In a way, I could say the smoothing out of the vocalist in this particular area makes J-pop specifically quite pleasing and having enough body so that you can actually enjoy the presence of the singer. Instruments in the mids, personally, I feel like it's very easy to just summarize everything with 3 words. It's warm, it's smooth, everything sounds quite light. Now, with all of the other instruments that I personally listen to, I don't think there's any particular highlight that I really want to talk about other than 2 specific instrument types. Keys, in my personal opinion, are quite good, and for things that are actually like, real pianos instead of like synths and stuff like that, instead of like electronic keyboards, grand pianos, Rhodes, they all have a slightly darker profile, which I find it to be quite interesting. And synths, in my opinion, is quite articulated, but also it kind of revolves in the same area as what I talked about in the vocals. Vocals, if males, it will be this. If it's females, it will be that. Since if it is digital, I feel like it's a little bit more, harsh. And if it's something that sounds more analog-y, it definitely has that smoothed out feeling, which I really, really like. And going on to the upper mids and treble, this is basically a V shape, so definitely you are expecting some good amounts of energy, but definitely it might be edging onto a very spicier side, despite this thing having, some levels of warm tinge overall. Hi-hats and percussions are quite good in terms of its level of dynamics, And the fun part about this is that I feel like this thing has done quite well in this particular area, where if you listen to, let's say, things with very, very quick hi-hats in the sets, kind of like, something along the lines of Black Folk, like, something along the lines of Yusuf Days, something along the lines of Snarky Puppy, you feel like you can hear the velocities of the hats being played extremely, extremely well. Like, you can hear the first note is a little bit louder than the next, and you don't even need to focus. It really just pops out as it is. So, and I feel like that's probably one of the more important things that I really want to highlight, is that this pair is doing hi-hats, percussions in the treble area with a lot of justice. And details in this area are also quite sparkly as well. Things like triangle clings, things like bells, things like chimes. But definitely overall, it's a little bit on the spicier side, a little bit on the sharper side. So for people who are treble sensitive, do take note of that. I think all of this can be mitigated or even, being solved by just a very simple cable roll or maybe just a very simple tip roll, because I don't do stuff like that a lot now already. But just changing the default tips from the black ones to this white board KBEAR ones is extremely big in terms of its difference. Which, wait, I don't think this is a KBEAR one, is it? I think this is a TRI. Yeah, this is a TRI whiteboard, which I'll probably put the name here because I honestly don't remember tips that much, other than my SpinFit Omnis, which is the only tips that I personally feel like is the best for me. But with that being said though, yeah, basically that's it for upper mids and trebles. And in terms of the airiness extension, I feel like this thing is alright, but you're probably going to notice more of the warmness throughout. So it gives you quite a laid back presentation rather than, this thing giving you quite an airy experience. Because like I said in the beginning, this is more of a warm tonality type of IEM, a V-shaped warm tonality IEM. Now, going on to some technical highlights that I really want to talk about. First of all, I think I'm just going to jump the gun here and say about staging first. For this price, for $100 US, I feel like it's quite amazing for the staging, as this thing has quite a good level of spaciousness and also has decent reach as well. Now, in terms of the dynamics though, although not as exaggerated like other IEMs that I've tested, if you're listening to more heavy tracks, the mid-range definitely has some slight levels of distortions initially, but after the burn-in, it all went away. So definitely, again, this is one of those pairs that you need to let it burn in a little bit, to let it sit a little bit so that it could probably perform better. Imaging and separation, in my personal opinion, can probably be done a little bit better, but then again, this thing has a warm tonality. So with that being said, you are expecting this thing to have a little bit more, smootheningness in between one of the two borders, if you get what I mean. And last but not least, detail retrieval. I think this overall is surprisingly doing quite well in this area. But specifically, like I mentioned, I only mentioned about the details in the upper mids and up. So mid-range, I wouldn't say it gives a lot of micro details, but macro details, they definitely give it quite a good level of musicality. If you want something that has very nice bass, you want something that has decent quality of the mids, but you want very good details on the treble side, which they don't really accentuate a lot of the macros but highlight quite a lot of the micros, I think this pair is quite good in that regard. So with that being said though, yeah, I think that's probably it. KBEAR Tourbillion Pros, this is quite a good set of IEMs in my personal opinion. Now, simply saying, this thing is quite interesting in terms of its take. It's in between musical and also giving you just enough detail so that it doesn't feel like it's too simple. So for people who definitely want to upgrade from their entry level IEMs to something a little bit more better in terms of musicality, in terms of dynamicness, in terms of bass performance, fun, this thing can definitely be a consideration for you guys. But definitely take note that this thing is not your particular pair that is more detailed in this price range. If you want something that's more detailed, definitely there are better sets out there. But also, again, all of these comes down to your preference. The MK12s, the Heidi's MK12s that I recently reviewed, that thing significantly has better musicality than most IEMs and is an objective upgrade from the MK10s. But within that price point, you can probably find better technical sets than that. But that thing prides itself in musicality, that thing prides itself in smoothened out resolution. This thing is probably more or less the same characteristics that the MK12s are trying to achieve. So if y'all want something that is, more of an upgrade but not really that much in the technical side, I think this one is quite a good jump for you guys. So yeah, I guess that's probably it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. So yeah, have a good day. Like, subscribe, comment, especially comment, guys. Let's just talk down below. And with that being said, have a good day.